Benedict Canyon, 1926. The heat shimmers off newly paved roads winding through the Hollywood Hills, where the scent of eucalyptus mixes with construction dust and the sharp tang of ambition. Here, where the city's new elite are carving their kingdoms from chaparral-covered slopes, a Polish immigrant's son is about to build something that will outlast his name, his studio, and nearly everyone who remembers why he built it in the first place. Jack Warner stands on 9.4 acres of raw hillside, squinting against the California sun that's nothing like the gray skies of London, Ontario, where he learned to hate being poor. He's 44 years old, and for the first time in his life, he's not running from creditors, not hiding in projection booths while bill collectors pound on studio doors, not sneaking out back entrances with reels of film under his arm, one step ahead of the men his family owes money. The jazz singer changed everything. Sound changed everything. And now Jack Warner is going to make sure nobody ever forgets it. The land beneath his feet once belonged to someone else. 3 properties, actually. 3 families who built their own dreams on this hillside, who planted their own gardens and raised their own children and thought they'd found permanence in Southern California's endless summer. Warner bought them all, wrote the checks, signed the papers, and ordered the demolitions. The wrecking crews came in the spring of 1926, reducing wood and plaster and memory to rubble that was hauled away in trucks that kicked up dust clouds visible from downtown Los Angeles. By summer, the ground was cleared. By fall, construction crews were pouring foundations for something that would make those vanished homes look like servants' quarters. The architect's plans call for 13,600 square feet of Georgian perfection. Red brick shipped from the East Coast, the kind that weathers like old money. White columns that belong on a Virginia plantation, not a California hillside. A symmetry so perfect, it looks like it was designed by someone desperate to prove they understand what wealth is supposed to look like. And maybe that's exactly what it is. Because Jack Warner, who grew up in a house where 9 people shared 4 rooms, who wore his brother's hand-me-downs until they fell apart, who watched his father Harry struggle to keep a bicycle repair shop afloat in Youngstown, Ohio, knows exactly what poverty looks like. He spent his entire life running from it. Now he's going to build a fortress that poverty can't breach. The construction takes years. Brick by brick, the mansion rises against the Hollywood Hills, a Georgian monument to the death of silence in cinema. While workers lay imported tile and hang crystal chandeliers, Warner Brothers Studios is printing money. The talkie revolution that Jack and his brothers Harry, Albert, and Sam gambled everything on is paying dividends that make their early struggles seem like someone else's life. Theater owners across America are ripping out orchestras and installing sound systems. Silent film stars with thick accents are watching their careers evaporate overnight. And the Warners, those scrappy sons of a Polish cobbler who couldn't make rent on a Pennsylvania storefront, are becoming the most powerful men in Hollywood. But power has a price that can't be measured in dollars. Sam Warner, the brother who believed in sound when everyone else thought they were crazy, died one day before the jazz singer premiered. Heart attack at 40 years old, never got to see the revolution he helped create. Jack stands in his rising mansion and knows that Sam should be here, should be walking these halls, choosing furniture, arguing about which bedroom gets the best view. Instead, there's just Jack, and a success that tastes like ashes every time he thinks about his brother. The mansion is completed in 1927, but Jack's not satisfied. How could he be? The house is perfect, and perfection is a kind of death. It's finished. Complete. Jack Warner has spent his whole life in motion, always building, always expanding, always proving something to someone. Maybe to the bill collectors who chased him through his 20s. Maybe to the established studios who looked down on the Warner brothers as upstarts and immigrants. Maybe to his father Harry, who died in 1927 without ever seeing his sons become the most powerful family in Hollywood. The estate spreads across Benedict Canyon like a declaration of arrival, 9.4 acres of manicured lawns that require a full-time groundskeeping staff. Gardens designed in the neoclassical style with marble fountains and precisely trimmed hedges that spell out geometric perfection. A 9-hole golf course that winds through the property. Because what's the point of success if you can't swing a club in your own backyard without ever seeing your neighbors? Tennis courts, a swimming pool that could host the Olympics. And at the center of it all, that Georgian mansion with its red brick facade and white columns, looking for all the world like it was transplanted from the Eastern establishment that would never quite accept the Warners as one of their own. Inside, the house is a museum of acquisition. Antiques purchased from European dealers who can smell new money from across the Atlantic. Paintings in gilt frames, selected more for their price tags than their artistic merit. Furniture that looks like it belongs in a country house in England, occupied by families with titles and centuries of breeding. Jack fills his home with the trappings of old money, but he can't buy what matters most about old money, the sense that you've always belonged, that you never had to prove anything, that your place in the world is as natural as breathing. His first wife, Irma, moves through these rooms like a ghost in a museum. They married in 1914 when Jack was a small-time film distributor with more dreams than dollars. She knew him when he was nobody, when success was just a possibility instead of a crushing responsibility. But success changes people, and the man who built this mansion isn't the man she married. He's harder now, more focused, consumed by the studio, by the need to stay on top, by the constant fear that it could all disappear as quickly as it came. The marriage fractures slowly, then all at once. By the early 1930s, they're living separate lives under the same elaborate roof. Irma in one wing, Jack in another, and between them all this Georgian perfection that was supposed to represent their triumph. Instead, it's a monument to everything they've lost, the intimacy, the partnership, the sense that they were building something together instead of just building. 1934. Jack meets Anne Boyar at a party, and she's everything Irma isn't. Younger, unburdened by memories of the hard years. She looks at Jack and sees the mogul, not the struggling immigrant's son. She sees the mansion, not the poverty he's running from. And Jack, who spent years in a marriage that's become a business arrangement, falls hard for the possibility of starting over. The divorce is finalized in 1935, and Jack Warner makes a decision that will define the estate for decades to come. He's going to erase Irma from the property, not just her presence, but every trace that she was ever here. Every memory of his first marriage, every reminder of who he was when he built this place. He's going to rebuild the mansion from the ground up, and when he's done, it will be like Irma never existed, like his first life never happened. The demolition begins in 1936. The same mansion he spent years building, the same Georgian perfection he poured his early success into, comes down wall by wall. Workers strip out the interiors he and Irma selected together. The antiques are sold or stored. The paintings come off the walls. Room by room, the house is gutted until only the shell remains. And then even that comes down. Jack Warner, who demolished 3 homes to build his first mansion, now demolishes his own house to build it again. Because if you have enough money, you can erase anything, even your own history. The reconstruction takes until 1937, and when it's finished, the new mansion is larger, grander, more imposing than the first. Still Georgian, still red brick and white columns, but now expanded to accommodate Jack's growing sense of his own importance. New rooms, new wings, new spaces designed for the life he's going to live with Anne, not the life he lived with Irma. The estate is reborn, and Jack marries Anne in a ceremony that christens the new version of his kingdom. But you can't actually erase the past, no matter how many times you rebuild. The foundation stones know. The land knows. The 3 families whose homes were demolished to make room for Warner's ambition, they're still there in the earth, their stories buried under imported brick and manicured lawns. Irma's presence still lingers in the bones of the place, in the basic footprint that Jack couldn't completely change without starting from scratch on different land. And Sam, dead brother Sam, he's in every corner of the house that Talkie Money built. The estate becomes famous in Hollywood's golden age. Jack throws parties that are really power plays, inviting stars and directors and producers and politicians, showing them what success looks like when you're one of the 4 brothers who changed cinema forever. Errol Flynn drinks by the pool. Bette Davis argues with Jack in the study. James Cagney plays tennis on the courts. And through it all, Jack Warner presides over his kingdom like a monarch, who can never quite forget that he's only first-generation royalty. The golf course becomes legendary. 9 holes winding through the property, each one perfectly maintained, each one a reminder that Jack Warner has so much land he can afford to use it for a game. He plays in the mornings before heading to the studio, walking the fairways he owns while planning the day's battles over budgets and scripts and stars who think they deserve more money. The course is private, exclusive, a place where Jack can swing a club and pretend he's a country gentleman instead of the son of a cobbler who once had to sneak out of his own office to avoid debt collectors. The gardens are equally excessive. Neoclassical designs that require constant maintenance, with marble statues imported from Italy and France, fountains that run on timers, spouting water into perfectly symmetrical pools, while California struggles through droughts that devastate the state's agriculture. Rose gardens tended by specialists who know more about horticulture than most people know about their own families. Every hedge trimmed to geometric precision, every flower bed arranged in patterns that spell out order and control and the kind of perfection that only exists when you have unlimited resources and unlimited staff. Inside the mansion, life settles into a rhythm of wealth and work. Jack rises early, breakfasts in the formal dining room where the table could seat 20, but usually only seats 2. He reviews scripts and budgets while eating eggs and toast prepared by a chef who once worked in European hotels. Then the drive down the canyon to the studio, where he rules Warner Brothers with an iron fist and a sharp tongue that can reduce grown men to tears. He's known for his temper, his ruthlessness, his willingness to fire anyone who crosses him. But he's also known for his hits, for his instinct for what audiences want, for his ability to turn a profit when other studios are bleeding money. Ann Warner transforms the mansion into a social hub. She throws parties that are written about in the society pages, events where Hollywood royalty mixes with actual royalty, where business deals are made over cocktails and careers are launched or destroyed over dinner. She's a gracious hostess, charming and beautiful, everything a mogul's wife is supposed to be. But she's also sharp, politically savvy, understanding that in Hollywood, social connections are as valuable as studio contracts. The 1940s bring war and change. While American soldiers fight in Europe and the Pacific, Hollywood churns out propaganda and escapism in equal measure. Warner Brothers produces films supporting the war effort, patriotic stories that boost morale and sell war bonds. Jack Warner throws his studio's resources behind the government, producing training films and documentaries and features that paint the conflict in black and white terms of good versus evil. The estate feels distant from the war, insulated by wealth and geography. While rationing affects most Americans, the Warners eat well. While gas is scarce, they drive. While ordinary families sacrifice, the mansion on Benedict Canyon continues its routine of parties and golf and excess. It's a bubble of privilege in a world at war, and Jack seems only dimly aware of the disconnect. Or maybe he's very aware, and that's why he works so hard to support the war effort through his films. Guilt manifests in strange ways when you're rich enough to avoid consequences. The post-war years bring new challenges. Television emerges as a threat to the movie business, and Jack Warner fights it with the same intensity he brought to every other battle in his life. He refuses to sell Warner Brothers films to television, believing that giving away content will destroy the theatrical experience. He invests in widescreen formats and color processes, anything to make movies more spectacular than what people can get for free in their living rooms. But the world is changing faster than Jack can adapt. The studio system that made the Warners powerful is crumbling. Stars are breaking their contracts, demanding independence. Directors want creative control. The old model of moguls ruling their kingdoms with absolute power is dying, and Jack Warner can feel it slipping away even as he sits in his mansion and surveys his 9.4 acres of permanence. The 1950s and 60s are years of slow decline. Warner Brothers remains profitable, still produces hits, still matters in Hollywood, but Jack's influence is waning. Younger executives, men who grew up with television instead of Nickelodeons, are making decisions about the future of entertainment, and Jack, now in his 70s, is increasingly seen as a relic of a previous era, a titan from the age of talkie pioneers, still fighting battles that were settled years ago. In 1966, Jack sells his stake in Warner Brothers to Seven Arts Productions. After 43 years of running the studio his family built, he walks away. The deal makes him richer than ever, but money was never really the point. The point was the power, the control, the ability to shape American entertainment, and now that's gone. He remains as a consultant, maintains an office, keeps the title, but everyone knows it's ceremonial. The Warner era is over. He retreats to the mansion on Benedict Canyon, spending more time on the golf course, more time in the gardens, more time looking at what he built instead of building new things. Anne is still there, still hosting parties, but they're smaller now. Fewer stars, fewer power brokers, more friends from the old days, telling stories about when they all mattered. The mansion becomes less of a power center and more of a memory palace, a monument to what was. Jack Warner dies in 1978 at the age of 86. He lived long enough to see his studio change hands multiple times, long enough to watch the industry he helped create transform into something he barely recognized, long enough to see television, which he fought so hard, become the dominant form of entertainment in American life, long enough to know that everything he built was impermanent except the mansion, and even that would outlive his ownership. Anne remains in the estate after Jack's death, but the house feels different without him. It's like the mansion was built as an extension of Jack's will, and without that will to animate it, it becomes just a very large house on very expensive land. She lives there quietly, a widow in a palace, until 1990 when she decides to sell. David Geffen, the music and film mogul, buys the Warner estate for $47.5 million. It's a record price for a Los Angeles property at the time, and it makes headlines around the world. Geffen, another self-made mogul, another Jewish kid who clawed his way to the top of entertainment, sees something of himself in Jack Warner's story. Or maybe he just sees a beautiful house in a great location. Either way, he becomes the new owner of 9.4 acres of Hollywood history. Geffen lives in the mansion for nearly 20 years, hosting his own parties, making his own deals, walking the same fairways Jack Warner walked. He renovates and updates, replacing Jack's antiques with contemporary art, modernizing systems, bringing the estate into the 21st century while preserving its essential character. The Georgian facade remains, the gardens stay meticulously maintained, the golf course continues to provide a private sanctuary from the city below. But Geffen is a businessman, not a sentimentalist. In 2020, he puts the estate on the market for $225 million, the highest asking price for a home in California history. The listing describes it as one of the finest estates in the world, A masterpiece of architecture and landscape design, a property with unparalleled privacy and prestige. What it doesn't mention is the three families whose homes were demolished to create it, or the first wife whose presence was erased when the mansion was rebuilt, or the brother who died before he could see the success his belief in sound technology created. The estate sits on the market for months. At $225 million, the pool of potential buyers is limited to a handful of billionaires, and most of them already have multiple estates. Some think the price is too high. Others question whether any house, no matter how magnificent, is worth $250 million. The property becomes a symbol of excess in an era of growing wealth inequality, a 9.4-acre middle finger to the idea that resources should be distributed fairly. In 2021, Jeff Bezos buys the Warner estate for $165 million. It's less than the asking price, but still a record for residential real estate in California. Bezos, founder of Amazon, one of the wealthiest people in human history, adds the mansion to his growing collection of properties. He owns homes in Washington, Texas, Washington, D.C., New York, and now this, Jack Warner's monument to escaping poverty and erasing the past. The sale closes quietly, without the fanfare that attended Geffen's purchase decades earlier. Bezos is known for his privacy, for controlling his public image as carefully as Jack Warner controlled his studio. He doesn't give interviews about the house, doesn't throw parties that make the society pages, doesn't play golf on the 9-hole course while photographers capture him from the street. The estate becomes invisible again, hidden behind gates and hedges and security systems far more sophisticated than anything Jack Warner could have imagined. But the land remembers. 9.4 acres of Benedict Canyon that have absorbed nearly a century of ambition and excess and erasure. The ground where three families built their lives before Jack Warner's checkbook made them disappear. The foundation stones of two separate mansions, one demolished to erase a failed marriage, both built on the idea that enough money can rewrite history. The gardens where thousands of parties happened, where deals worth billions were made, where people who shaped American entertainment drank and laughed and schemed. The Georgian mansion still stands, red brick weathering beautifully, white columns, still imposing. 13,600 square feet of rooms where Jack and Ann Warner lived their lives, where David Geffen threw parties for presidents and rock stars, where Jeff Bezos now walks halls filled with ghosts he doesn't acknowledge. The golf course remains perfectly maintained, 9 holes winding through property worth more per acre than most people will earn in their lifetimes. The fountains still run, spouting water in a state that's experiencing its worst drought in recorded history. From the street, if you can find the right angle through the gates, you can glimpse the mansion rising above its landscaped grounds. It looks permanent, solid, like it's always been there and always will be. But that's the lie expensive architecture tells. Everything is temporary. Every empire falls. Every monument to permanence eventually crumbles or changes hands or gets demolished by someone with newer money and different dreams. Jack Warner built this estate to prove he'd made it, to show that the immigrant's son who fled from creditors was now untouchable. He demolished 3 homes to create space for his ambition. He tore down his own mansion to erase memories of a failed marriage. He created a paradise of privilege on a California hillside and thought it would last forever. And, in a way, it has. The estate endures, outliving Jack and Sam and Harry and Albert, outliving Irma and Anne, outliving the studio system and the talkie revolution and the golden age of Hollywood. But endurance isn't the same as victory. The mansion survives, but it's hollow now, a museum of other people's ambitions, occupied by billionaires who add it to their collections like another Picasso or rare vintage car. The 9-hole golf course is beautiful, but nobody plays it. The gardens are impeccable, but nobody walks them. The rooms are furnished and maintained, but most of them sit empty, waiting for an owner who's rarely there, whose attention is focused on companies and rocket ships and the next thing he's going to conquer. Benedict Canyon hasn't changed much since 1926. The roads are paved better now. The houses are larger. The security system's more sophisticated. But it's still the same hillside where the city's wealthy come to build their kingdoms, where success manifests in acreage and architecture and the ability to live above everyone else in both elevation and economic reality. The Warner Estate is the crown jewel of this enclave, the biggest and most famous property in a neighborhood full of mansions. But if you dig down through the manicured lawns, past the imported brick and marble fountains, past the foundations of Jack Warner's 2 mansions, you'd find traces of the 3 homes he demolished. Pieces of tile, fragments of wood, maybe a child's toy lost when the wrecking crews came in 1926. Evidence that other people lived here first, that their dreams mattered too, that history isn't just about who wins, but also about who gets erased. And maybe that's the real story of the Warner Estate, not the success story of an immigrant's son who built a mansion and founded a studio, not the tale of Hollywood excess and golden age glamour, not even the chronicle of billionaires passing a property between them like a trophy. The real story is about what gets destroyed in the pursuit of permanence, the homes demolished, the marriages ended, the brother who died too young, the first wife erased from history. The constant need to tear down and rebuild, to create and destroy, to prove over and over that you belong in a world that will never quite accept you. Jack Warner spent his life running from poverty and toward something he could never quite name. He built an empire in cinema and a palace on a hillside, accumulated more wealth than his father could have imagined, achieved a level of success that should have satisfied any reasonable person. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough. Because the poverty you're running from isn't just about money. It's about belonging, acceptance, the terror that someone will look at you and see the scared kid who couldn't pay his bills instead of the mogul who changed American entertainment. The mansion can't give you that. The 9.4 acres can't provide it. The golf course and the gardens and the Georgian facade and all the parties and all the power and all the money in the world can't fill the hole that poverty leaves in your soul. You can demolish every reminder of your past, rebuild your house to erase your history, buy enough land to never have to see your neighbors, but you're still you, still the immigrant son, still running. And now the estate belongs to another runner, another self-made billionaire who clawed his way to unimaginable wealth and bought a mansion to prove something to someone. Maybe to himself, maybe to the people who doubted him, maybe to a world that can never be impressed enough. The cycle continues. The property changes hands, the price goes up. The story gets told again with different names and different details, but the same essential truth. We build monuments to escape our pasts, and our pasts outlive the monuments. Benedict Canyon, 2025. The Warner estate rises above the Hollywood Hills, red brick glowing in the California sun, white columns standing straight and proud. 9.4 acres of perfectly maintained grounds, a 9-hole golf course where nobody plays, gardens where nobody walks. Inside, rooms furnished for a life that's lived somewhere else, by someone too busy conquering new frontiers to spend much time in the palace his money bought. The gates stay closed. The security cameras sweep the perimeter. The groundskeepers maintain the lawns and trim the hedges and clean the pool that nobody swims in. And the house waits, as it's waited for nearly a century for its next owner. For the next person who thinks they can buy permanence with enough money, who believes that the right address and the right architecture can finally make them feel like they belong. But the land knows better. 9.4 acres that have seen 3 demolished homes and 2 demolished mansions, that have absorbed the ambitions of moguls and billionaires, that have witnessed a century of American wealth concentrating in fewer and fewer hands. The land knows that everything built on it is temporary, that every owner is just passing through, that the only constant is change, and the stories we tell ourselves about why we deserve what we have. Jack Warner built this estate to prove he'd made it, and in doing so, he proved the opposite. He proved that making it is impossible, that success is a moving target, that no amount of wealth can buy the peace that comes from accepting who you are and where you came from. He demolished other people's homes and his own past and any obstacle in his path, and at the end he still died knowing that his industry had moved on without him, that his studio would survive him, but his influence wouldn't, that his mansion would outlast his memory. And maybe that's fitting. Maybe the house is the perfect monument to Jack Warner because it's exactly what he was. Impressive, expensive, built on demolished dreams and ultimately empty at its core. A Georgian facade hiding the same desperate need for validation that drove a Polish immigrant's son to flee creditors and build empires and tear down anything that reminded him of who he used to be. The sun sets over Benedict Canyon, painting the Warner estate in golden light. For a moment, it looks perfect. Like a postcard of success, a photograph of the American dream realized in brick and marble and manicured lawns. But dreams are just stories we tell ourselves while we're sleeping. And the Warner estate, for all its beauty and all its price and all its history, is ultimately just another story about people running from themselves, convinced that the right piece of property will finally let them stop. It never does. The running never stops. And the mansion, solid and permanent as it seems, is really just another way to avoid looking at the scared kid in the mirror who's still wondering if any of this is real, if he really belongs, if he's finally done enough to deserve peace. The estate endures. The story continues. And somewhere in the archives of demolished history, 3 families whose homes were destroyed to make room for Jack Warner's ambition are still waiting for someone to remember they existed too. But nobody's coming to tell their story. They're not famous enough, rich enough, powerful enough. They're just ghosts under the lawn, forgotten foundations beneath Georgian brick. Proof that in America, if you have enough money, you can erase anyone, even yourself.